Welcome into 49ers Access. My name is Sterling Bennett, and we have a Brock Purdy injury update. And could the San Francisco 49ers be interested in signing former Giants quarterback Daniel Jones? Yes, you heard me right. Could the 49ers want to sign Danny Dimes, Vanilla Vic, during the 2024 NFL season? That's what we're talking about today. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and let's dive into the latest on the Niners quarterback position, starting with their starter, Brock Purdy. Now, Brock Purdy's not going to play today against the Green Bay Packers. He has shoulder soreness. The injury lingered throughout the entirety of the week. Tried to practice, had a couple of throws, I believe it was on Wednesday, maybe Thursday. Gave it a go, went back into the locker room, didn't work out, is not going to play, been already ruled out for this game against the Green Bay Packers, leading to Brandon Allen getting the start over Joshua Dobbs, who is many people's favorite to play or their choice to start in case Brock Purdy can't. Shanahan said, nope, we're going with Brandon Allen, and that's where we're at today. But because the injury lingered throughout the entirety of the week and seemingly didn't get better, in fact, looked to have gotten worse, it led many, including myself, to speculate the injury is worse than San Francisco is leading on for it to be. The idea that it's shoulder soreness doesn't seem to make sense, considering shoulder soreness usually means a 1-week injury at best, whereas now we're talking 2 weeks potentially for Brock Purdy to be out. There's been mixed reporting on Brock Purdy's injury status this week and next week. The Niners officially thought that he could have played this Sunday, but because when he practiced, the thing lingered and didn't work out, well, he couldn't play, and I think it shocked them to a certain degree. Now there's reports that while San Francisco maybe is leaning towards Brock playing against Buffalo, there was reports earlier in the week saying that Brock Purdy could miss next week's game against the Bills on Sunday Night Football. But this morning, Adam Schefter said that the Niners believe Brock Purdy should be able to play next week against the Bills. And the injury does not seem to be serious. That in itself is a lot. That's a lot, right? It does feel like that when you get so much mixed reporting on shoulder soreness, it doesn't sit right. It doesn't feel right. It does make me believe there is something more serious happening. Now, I'm not saying he tore something. I'm not saying he's out for the entirety of the year. I'm not saying it's going to affect his entire career. All I'm saying is that this feels a little bit more than just shoulder soreness. The idea that Brock is going to miss 1 week and 2 weeks and be ready to go, okay, that leads to it being, shoulder soreness. But the way that he tried to practice and the way they thought he could try to play this week, then only for them to say, it sounds like he's not going to play next week, only for them this morning to leak to Schefter to say, well, he actually could have played next week. It's weird. I have learned, like Fish and Chips says here, don't believe anything Shanahan says. I'll wait to hear from Brock. It's certainly a good angle, good avenue to take. You just cannot trust Kyle Shanahan in regards to injuries. And it feels like this is, while maybe not, again, a tear or a break or something catastrophic, it does feel like there is something else going on. Now, maybe that's wrong and we're incorrect and we shouldn't speculate, but because of the way San Francisco handles these injuries updates and stuff, it makes it easy to do so. It opens the avenue and the door to question, hey, how real is this and how serious could Brock's injury be? Lori Matthews asks here in the YouTube chat, do you think it's the shoulder or the elbow again? I don't think it's the elbow. I think if Brock re-injured the elbow, they would say it's an elbow injury. I think they officially have to do so on the NFL report. So I don't think it's an elbow. I do think it's a shoulder. But I don't think it's just shoulder soreness. If it was shoulder soreness, I think he would have thrown more this week. And there wouldn't have been so much mixed reporting on if he can play next week too. I mean, I told you in the last podcast we did that I had a thinned UCL. Brock Purdy tore his UCL. It's very hard to throw on a thinned UCL, and I did that for a long time during my baseball career. Now, I'm not Brock Purdy, nor in the NFL, but shoulder soreness is something every athlete gets. Every athlete, every quarterback has. That's why I tend to believe that this is not just shoulder soreness. I guarantee you Brock's had shoulder soreness many times in his career. In fact, outside of that Week 18 game last year against the Rams, Brock Purdy has been Mr. Durability throughout his entire career. I have the stat here. He has, again, besides that Week 18 game last year against the Rams where all the starters sat, including Brock Purdy, this snaps a 101 starting streak for Brock Purdy once he was named quarterback one of the team. 24 games in high school at Perry. At Iowa State, 46 games as starting quarterback, and in the NFL, 31 games. So that's what makes me believe that if this was shoulder soreness, like, you're 5-5. This is the biggest game of the season. This is an NFC opponent, a wild card team in front of you. This is a game Brock plays if it's only shoulder soreness. Fish and Chip says here, role play, I'm 5-5. It's not my offense. Brock is sore. Let's see if I can win with Allen. I don't believe that, because you are 5-5. You are 1.5 games behind the Cardinals for first place in the NFC West. You lost against Seattle last week. You have to win this game. You can't fall to 5-6. Another NFC loss. You can't do that to an NFC wildcard opponent in front of you. This game, while isn't going to doom or boom your season, if you will, it's going to go a long way into deciding your playoff standing. Now, yes, San Francisco's best avenue to go to the playoffs is through the NFC West, beating the Rams, beating the Cardinals, beating the Bears, and doing what they can. But, with the way things have played out, 5-5, like, Brock played on a cracked rib 2 years ago on a short week on Thursday Night Football on the road in Seattle. Now, I get it. The Niners are saying, hey, let's preserve Brock. If he misses one game, it's not going to kill us, which is true. But now we're talking 2 weeks. If it lingers, maybe, and it's just me saying this, 3 weeks. Like, you never know exactly how serious these things are. And if it's more than just shoulder soreness, we have no idea what's going to happen at all. Brock sleeps incorrectly, one throw he takes, you never know what could happen. And they're going to pay him in 5-6 months' time. Like, you don't want to risk your franchise quarterback getting further injured on what they may deem a meaningless game, but as fans, we're sitting here like, hey, you're 5-5, this is a must-win game, and Brock's not going to play. Which is why I think that there is something more serious going on, but I don't know to what degree of seriousness that is. Lori Matthews here brings up a great point, saying Shanahan's not a doctor. Thank God he's not. He'd be a terrible one. I'll tell you that one. If the MRI didn't show anything, practice is the only way to evaluate his play. I don't think they're trying to hide anything. I don't think they're necessarily trying to hide anything. I just believe that, well, yes, he had an MRI. Yes, that, they try to throw whatnot. I just think it's the way Brock came off the field that I can guarantee you this. The Niners, like with Brock Purdy's initial UCL rehab when he tore it against the Philadelphia Eagles a couple years back in the playoffs, the media really didn't see him throw until day one of practice, right? It was off to the side before practice even started, no OTAs and training camp. You never saw Brock unless he was walking on the sideline or doing some few runs here or there. I believe that the Niners did have Brock throw before practice, before anybody saw, whether it was Grant Cohn, David Lombardi. I believe San Francisco made sure to kind of hide his mini rehab during the week. I would like to think San Francisco had him throw early in the day, even before he had that practice where he didn't finish it because of his shoulder. That said, it does make me believe that while San Francisco maybe isn't hiding, a tear or break, that they are hiding the severity of how sore his shoulder may be, if you will. It just feels like that, you don't miss one game because of shoulder soreness. You don't miss more than one game with shoulder soreness. Now, I'm not here to say it's terrible and season's over with and Brock's bad and Shanahan's lying. It just feels like there's more going on. And the reason why I say that is because, and we'll dive into a second, Fish and Chip says here, yes, Sterling, one loss in the wild card race and one loss in the division in the cards, it's virtually impossible to get to the playoffs, yet nobody's talking about it. I feel like that the Niners are in a spot where if any game this year, because you played so poorly or under the expectations, it's a game like this, you want to have your starting quarterback out there, but he can't be. That's why I think it's a little more serious than what's going on. Like, take Nick Bosa, for example. Nick Bosa has 2 hip and oblique injuries and didn't even take the trip to Green Bay. That, to me, signals it's serious. He could miss a month of time, potentially, and you may not see him for at least the next 2 weeks in cold weather in Green Bay and Buffalo. That makes sense. It's your star defensive player of the year a couple years ago. He can barely even walk correctly, let alone sack the quarterback with 2 bad hips. That makes sense to not play him. Whereas Brock, again, in the biggest game of the year, Brock's not playing. His attitude, his demeanor isn't one to sit those things out unless it's a serious injury. That's why I think there's something else happening. But again, I don't know the severity of the injury. Bobo says here in the YouTube chat, this year is a wash already. Rest everyone next year. Seahawks destroyed our season once again. Funny enough, if San Francisco loses this game, this season's actually not over just yet. Because if the Cardinals lose to Seattle today and Philadelphia beats the Rams tonight, San Francisco essentially walks into next week in the exact same place. Where you may kiss the wild card goodbye. That may already be the case. You are fighting for the NFC West and the NFC West only if you lose today. And that's kind of already been where they're at this season. If they're 5-6 and 5-7 post these next 2 road games, then maybe we're having a conversation of shut down Christian McCaffrey, Purdy, get what you have to get, and get healthy in the offseason or whatever. Those are conversations to have in the next few weeks. But honestly, the Niners need help, but have to help themselves. And helping themselves would hopefully get Brock Purdy back in the fray and play today, but that's not going to happen, at least in this week. It's over, Sterling, and you know what Bobo says. Well, it might be, but if you're not mathematically out of it, I'm not going to go that far, but I understand the doom and gloom of the situation. San Francisco has to win today. It's a backup quarterback in the biggest game of the year because your starter can't play because of shoulder soreness. That is concerning. That is worrisome to me. But anything can happen, right? San Francisco could go the old Christian McCaffrey wildcat against the Philadelphia Eagles circa 2022 in the playoffs and score a touchdown. We have no idea what's going to happen. You hope Trent Williams can play and age you a little bit, but, as Larry Matthews says here, it ain't over till the fat lady sings, and I ain't no lady, but I ain't singing yet. So you never know. But again, I do get Bobo. There is some doom and gloom. Frank Weber says here, I'm going to assume you... I'm not going to read the first comment, but everybody can read it on the screen. Is the Duke of Talentbury. That's a funny comment, Frank. I really appreciate you joining the show. Let's talk about this. Fish and Chips asks here, so only 2 Super Bowl losers have not returned to the playoffs, right? That would be what, San Francisco and... I guess Philadelphia made it last year, barely. I don't know. I don't know the exact stat, but I know San Francisco is one of them. And look, it's okay to have a down year, a recalibration year. You just hope that in those years, you make the playoffs. That's kind of the thing where, Philadelphia last year was a terrible team late. Their season cratered, but they made the playoffs still. They got bounced in the first round, mind you, in a pretty bad loss against the Buccaneers, but they realized, okay, you made the playoffs, you salvaged the season, you don't win anything, but we got to change some stuff. Now, if I, words are hard to say. Let me ask you this. Would you rather miss the playoffs this year, get a higher draft pick, or be Philadelphia last year, where you kind of barely put things together, you squeak in late, and you lose in the first round? At that point, if you are Bobo here, you say, season's over with, wash it. But if San Francisco squeaks in and it costs them 2 to 3 draft positions, does that matter to you? I think that's kind of like a semantics question of you're in the playoffs, you give yourself a chance to win, and if Brock's healthy, whatever. But I do think that it is kind of interesting that we're talking about Brock Purdy's injury, and that coincides with the report that the Niners are interested somewhat in bringing in Daniel Jones. According to NFL Network's Ian Rappaport, the Niners are among teams interested in signing former Giants quarterback Daniel Jones. He also says while the Purdy injury doesn't seem to be serious, there's a chance he misses a few weeks, leading to Jones being a potential option for the San Francisco 49ers. And this is why I believe there's kind of a mixed bag of, okay, so Brock Purdy's injury isn't serious, but they want to bring in Daniel Jones. Now, if you are of my thinking, that doesn't make sense. You don't bring Daniel Jones in to be quarterback 3. You don't bring Daniel Jones in to be your backup when you're giving Joshua Dobbs guaranteed money, when you feel comfortable riding with Brandon Allen in a must-win game this week. Now, there are some pros and cons to Daniel Jones being brought into San Francisco. I do want to answer some questions here first. Santa Clara Fella says, if we lose, then I say we tank for a high draft pick. We draft an offensive lineman or an edge rusher. We also get 100% healthy and go all in next year at Super Bowl 60 at Levi Stadium. I hope Kyle does some introspection and changes his ways. The last part's probably not going to happen. He may fire Brian Schneider, and you may see the personnel changes on the offensive line and the edge. I think it's really important to find Nick Bosa, the number 2 guy opposite him, and improve left guard, center, and right tackle. But I think those are glaring issues that you really can't ignore any longer. I'm hoping Kyle does that. They went from trenches out to then the out in trench. Like they went from in their first 2 years building trenches, right? It was Solomon Thomas and Mike McGlinchey, Nick Bosa. And then they went from there to then building from out to in. That has to kind of revert back to what it was when Shanahan and John Lynch got hired here. They built trenches out. Now they've been building from the out to inside in the trenches. Flip that once again, get back to what you were doing in 2017 through 2021, and you'll find some strength again on the offense. Fish and Chips says, so today's game, who can win it for us? I don't see anyone playing dynamic football except for Mason pre-benching. George Kittle's back. It's a big one for us in a variety of ways. Tight end as a receiver, but also as a blocker too. Eric Saubert was atrocious, just god-awful against Seattle in regards to a run blocker. I do think that getting Kittle back will help Christian McCaffrey, and I hope that'll also get Jordan Mason some reps in cold weather. I'm not sure if it's snowing today in Green Bay. Even if it's not, though, going to be chilly. I think you do want to have Jordan Mason out there in company. And Niners Lifer says, the Eagles had a great draft. You're right, they did last year. Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean. But that's because those players fell to them. Now, I think we can all say that the Saints should have taken Quinyon Mitchell, but it all comes down to, personnel and whatnot. A lot of it's luck in the draft, right? You get lucky. San Francisco got lucky. Dominic Pooney fell. They kind of stole Renardo Green. San Francisco traded back a couple of times with, I think it was the Chiefs or somebody else, to allow them to take Kingsley Suamatea, who everybody wanted, and he kind of played himself off the field because he wasn't ready year one. Meanwhile, San Francisco's had one of the best drafts of anybody this year in how they played. Niner Lifer also says center's a big need. Every good line has a good center. I agree. Chiefs, Creed Humphrey, man. Jason Kelsey in Philadelphia. Your offensive line can be a weapon for you, not just left tackle. You want to have the center and the right guard and the right tackle and left guard all together. Usually you want to have one weak spot in the offensive line, and you hope it's on the interior so you can kind of hide it. San Francisco's had a bad left guard this year, a bad center this year, and a really bad right tackle. So I think getting a center, whether it's a veteran via free agency or a draft pick, is going to help San Francisco a lot. But I do want to talk about Daniel Jones because that's the big conversation we're having this morning. And going back to my previous comment that the Niners don't believe Brock Purdy's injury is serious, but they have interest in Daniel Jones. Now, does the Daniel Jones move make sense schematically? Sure. There isn't any salary implications, Lori, but like Frank says here in the YouTube chat, he has to clear waivers first. Now, the expectation is no one's taken that contract on, and he's going to be a free agent once he clears waivers. No one's claiming him. He'll be a free agent to pick and choose where he wants to sign. But according to Adam Schefter, he wants to go to a situation where he's playing meaningful football. Now, does that mean playing meaningful football in the playoffs? Does it mean getting, reps down the stretch of the season? Does that mean backing up Brock Purdy once he's healthy again? Does that mean, the next month or so, if Brock's out that long, Jones playing in a friendly system in Kyle Shanahan's Niners? Like, a lot of that's kind of like, well, what does that exactly mean? Because the Ravens and the Vikings are two teams that also have some interest in Daniel Jones, but he's not gonna get any reps over Lamar Jackson, and he's likely not gonna play over Sam Darnold. And next year, he's not gonna play over JJ McCarthy. So it's a little like, okay, like what does that mean? And right now, in my own recollection, the only playoff caliber, team in contention that needs a quarterback would be the San Francisco 49ers if Brock Purdy misses a handful of time or weeks. We don't know what the situation with Jones is. Did he ask for his release or what? Fish and chips? Yes. Daniel Jones asked for his release after being put from quarterback 1, the starter, all the way to quarterback 4 in scout team safety. So Jones wanted out of New York after what happened in his benching. So he wants to go somewhere where he can play. He wants to go somewhere where he can play some meaningful football down the stretch. And if Brock's going to be out for the next 3-4 weeks, if that's the worst case scenario, Jones could theoretically slide in to be quarterback 2 this week and be quarterback 1 the next few weeks if Brock misses time. Now, I do want to say this, that Daniel Jones, his career has been muddled with struggles. It has been a myriad of issues, interceptions, turnovers, just boneheaded plays where you're like, he really is the worst part of Eli Manning. Like, oh my God, former first-round pick, should have never been a first-round pick, but he was. It's not his fault. Good for him. But outside of that 2002 campaign with New York, where they went 9-6-1, snuck into the playoffs and beat the Vikings in the first round, it's been not great. And even in that year, it really wasn't great for Daniel Jones. He had 15 passing touchdowns, 7 rushing touchdowns, so only 22 total touchdowns that year for the Giants. The thing with him is a career low 5 interceptions. So he is this kind of higher upside physical quarterback with his mobility, but it really comes down to, can he be a game manager? Now, there is some pushback, and I think that it's worth, and I think it actually makes sense. Like, you're already paying Joshua Dobbs relatively good money, and he can't even see the field. You are going with Brandon Allen in a must-win game today against Green Bay. Okay, does Jones make sense in that realm? We'll dive into that in a second. But I do think that to give Jones some credit, to give Jones, I guess you can say, his kudos, he really has been a quarterback held back by bad offensive line play and literally no weapons around him at all. His number one receiver has been Darius Slayton the majority of his time in New York. They got Malik Neighbors this year, and it just really hasn't worked out for him. I think there is a conversation to be had of a change of scenery to a more quarterback-friendly system. Could improve his play. We've seen quarterbacks step in San Francisco under Kyle Shanahan and revitalize their careers. I mean, Brian Hoyer was a lost puppy and somehow played the next 5 seasons post being in San Francisco after a terrible season he had with the Niners. You've seen quarterbacks like Nick Mullins get jobs elsewhere. Beathard got relatively nice chunk of money with the Jaguars to back them up. I think he's out of there. But you've seen quarterbacks be in San Francisco, have some success, and then use that to give them an extra 2 or 3 years to the NFL career they have. I also think that despite Daniel Jones maybe having the struggles he has had in New York with a couple different head coaches, a couple different systems, and then the media out there is crazy, as Santa Clara Fella says here. You struggle once, it's over with. Like, you're done. That said, I do think that a quarterback like Daniel Jones, the biggest thing you heard from him is that while he may lack the arm strength, that he may have mobility to a certain degree, he may not be the best quarterback, first-round talent, he's always had a high intellect. And I think, he's a Duke product, really smart kid, not a really smart man. It's never been about how smart he is. And I think that could be something that we look at and say, you know what? He could pick up Shanahan's system faster than, say, I don't know, Trey Lance could, or Jimmy Garoppolo could. And those guys, albeit not Trey Lance, Jimmy G, had a pretty good run in San Francisco as a quarterback. Now, I'm not comparing the two as players, but I think that Jones could pick up the system relatively quickly, and we wouldn't be talking about, oh, well, what a waste this year. It has to be a 2-year contract for San Francisco to actually make some money or be worth the while for him. The good thing about Jones is, or the bad thing about Jones is that you have to ask yourself the question, who is he? Is he that 2022 player, or is he who he's been the last 16 games? Now, he was hurt last year, missed some time, but in the last 16 games, Jones has a 3-13 record as a starter, 64.7% completion percentage, under 3,000 yards passing, just 10 passing touchdowns, 13 interceptions, a 76.6 quarterback rate, a 36.9 QBR, and under 500 yards rushing with 3 touchdowns and 8 fumbles. If you're hearing that right, that is 13 touchdowns to 21 turnovers. That is going to drive Kyle Shanahan crazy and mad and berserk and nuts, and that could lead to Kyle Shanahan saying, you know what, I don't want to do that. Not a good choice for me and for us in San Francisco. But again, in a more quarterback-friendly system with Debo, albeit not being Debo in previous years, you have now Kittle and Christian McCaffrey and Juwan Jennings and Ricky Pearsall. You could honestly say that the odds Daniel Jones plays better than he does now is better than he would be in New York. Now, yes, Daniel Jones has been a bust. He is a bust. That doesn't mean that it makes Dilfer's numbers look good. You're right. Frank asks here, how long would it take Jones to get up to speed? By then, Purdy could return. That's why the interest is weird. Because, it's going to take more than 1 week for Jones to play, right? But I do think he's smart. The high intellect could lead him starting earlier than expected. But that said, that's why the interest in Daniel Jones doesn't make sense if you believe Purdy's injury is only a 1-week thing. Like, something doesn't add up here to me. That's why I'm very hesitant to say Purdy's going to be back in a week's time. I don't believe it. I don't believe it at all. I think Purdy's going to miss 2, 3, 4 weeks maybe, because the Daniel Jones, the interest doesn't make sense if you believe Brock's going to be back in 1 week's time. Doesn't make sense. And it's not worth buying a backup quarterback for a more expensive chunk of change than, say, Joshua Dobbs or Brandon Allen, when you expect Purdy to play the next 5 or 6 games the rest of the season. Moving on here in my notes, I do think that Daniel Jones would be an improvement over Brandon Allen and over Joshua Dobbs. Daniel Jones isn't a quarterback to not play within the scheme. He will do everything Kyle Shanahan wants him to do, which is what makes him so intriguing as a backup option for Kyle Shanahan. Shanahan also, really wants his quarterbacks as backups and sometimes starters to lean on him, trust the system, and don't go out of your bubble, stay in your lane, do what he says. That's what Kyle Shanahan wants. Blindly trust, I'm going to put you in a position to succeed. I think Daniel Jones could be kind of the best of both worlds in regarding to combining Allen and Dobbs as a backup. Jones will play in the system and trust Kyle like Brandon Allen will, but can extend plays with his legs, making him more dangerous, similar to what Joshua Dobbs does. Although the reason why Dobbs doesn't play or start in Purdy's absence is because, go back to the preseason, Dobbs is much more prone to getting out of the scheme, getting out of the system, playing, I don't want to say hero ball, but doing things differently than Shanahan wants. even games against Tennessee and the Saints, there was this, okay, Dobbs, like you're not hitting timing routes and you're kind of hesitant and you're just running the football. And that's great. It makes more exciting football. I think it makes Dobbs more dangerous as a quarterback to play against on defense, but there's a reason why Shanahan doesn't want that. But I do think Jones, for a year, maybe two, in San Francisco, that he could kind of give Shanahan that kind of, okay, well, let's combine Allen and Dobbs together. A mobile quarterback that will do everything you want him to do and play within your system. I think it could be a good signing for San Francisco. But the big question is not, okay, sign Daniel Jones. If Purdy's out for a long time, say it's a month, the next 4 weeks, San Francisco is 5-5. Could Daniel Jones theoretically save San Francisco's season? You got the Packers this week, not going to play. The odds Daniel Jones would, one, play against the Bills is low. And the odds he beats the Bills is lower. But then you're talking about, getting into games against the Rams and the Cardinals. And, you start to linger, what does the rest of the season look like for San Francisco? It's Packers, and it's Bills, then it's Bears, and it's Rams. Well, Daniel Jones could beat the Bears at home. Daniel Jones could, oddly enough, I do think beat the Rams at home, but it's just kind of a weird, the odds aren't very high of doing so. So I don't think Daniel Jones could theoretically save San Francisco's season. I think Jones would really be brought in on a 2-year contract, and I don't think he'd want that. I really don't think Shanahan or Daniel Jones would say, hey, give you a 2-year deal. Even if Shanahan says, let's do it, I don't think, Jones is a season saver. I think Daniel Jones is, depending on what he wants. Does he want that 1 year, 6-week time period to play some football in a new system and kind of reset his market, if you will? Or if Jones is open to it, a 2-year deal where he can come into San Francisco. He's still young. He's under 30. Come into San Francisco, rehab his image like Sam Darnold in San Francisco or Baker Mayfield in LA, and kind of reset himself, make him a more intriguing fit to be a team's bridge quarterback like Darnold is this year, and if things go his way, get a shot to start for the entire season. I do think that is, depending on what Jones wants, could be an intriguing fit for San Francisco. Now, the beautiful thing about Daniel Jones is that, let's say San Francisco signs him for the next 6 weeks. They bring him in. I don't know if they would cut bait with Joshua Dobbs or Brandon Allen. I think Allen signed for 1 year, Dobbs for 2 years, so it makes sense that you'd cut Brandon Allen, but that's kind of Brock Purdy's go-to guy behind the scenes. Now, maybe you don't care about that if Brock's going to be out the rest of the year. That's an option, or Brock goes on injured reserve if he's out for the rest of the year. You don't worry about it at all, but would you cut one of those guys to bring in Daniel Jones? I'm not sure, but if you did bring in Daniel Jones in any form or fashion, if he leaves in free agency, San Francisco gets a compensatory pick, so they can get maybe a 5th-round pick or a 6th-round pick in return for Daniel Jones if he leaves in free agency, depending on how much he signs for. So there is a lot of positive things that could come with signing Daniel Jones. Now, I get it. You hear Daniel Jones' name and you go, ugh, gross, ew. Some of you in the comments think that, Jones would, give you a higher chance for a better pick in regards to tanking your record and also giving you a comp pick back. Now, I don't know if that's the route I'd take. I really do think there is a way that Jones, say they sign him, he could beat the Bears, he could beat the Dolphins, the Cardinals. There are teams Jones could beat to keep your season alive, but you just got to have help. And the thing is, even if Purdy's healthy, you got to have help anyways. But I do think there is intriguing options, or there are positives to signing and bringing in Daniel Jones. The thing is, though, what happens if San Francisco wins today against the Packers? Does that end the whole conversation? Maybe. Does San Francisco say, you know what? That's when the 2-year contract comes into play? I don't know. I do think the Daniel Jones stuff may come down to if San Francisco wins today. If Brandon Allen goes out there and he sucks, well, didn't start calling Danny Dimes and saying, hey, what's up? But if they win today and you're like, wow, and Brock's going to be out for 2 more weeks, you'll ride this thing out. Because then it's the Bills and then it's the Bears. Like, you can envision a way where if Allen plays the next 3 games and he's 2-1 in that time period, Purdy comes back, you're above 500 or you're at 500, you're in a good spot. Because then it's the Rams, Sunday Night Football, or maybe it's Monday Night Football, and you have the Cardinals still, and the Dolphins still. Like, really it comes down to today, to me, for Daniel Jones's potential tenure in San Francisco. I do want to get to some comments here in the YouTube chat. Fish and Chips says, Daniel Jones's face stare is scary. I would be very interested to see the Daniel Jones memes if he signs with San Francisco. The minute he throws a pick or a fumble, Shanahan being just like, shaking his head on the sideline, disappointed father face, right? Jones just like, what happened? I don't know. You're like, okay. He also says here, chances of Allen throwing 3 picks today high, at being sacked 6 times, very high. I don't think the sacks are really the concern if Trent Williams plays. The Packers' pass rush really isn't that good, and they played a bad Bears offensive line and did nothing really against them. I think the picks are certainly an option, knowing that Xavier McKinney is one of the best turnover makers or takeaway makers in the NFL at safety. But the sacks I'm not too concerned about in regards to Brandon Allen. Santa Clara Fella says, we're going to need Purdy to beat Buffalo. If we somehow eke this game out today with Allen, then I can't see it happening twice against the Bills. Yeah, I mean, you don't technically have to beat the Bills. Win today, you can lose to Buffalo. The Buffalo game really means nothing in regards to the playoff picture. Yes, it's a win and a loss for sure, but it's an AFC opponent. If you can just win today and beat the Cardinals and the Rams and the Bears, you can lose to the Dolphins, theoretically, and you'll be okay. I do think that, but that's for a wild card conversation. Obviously, for the NFC West and the record-wise, you want to beat the Packers and the Bills and the Dolphins and the Rams and the Bears and the Cardinals for sure. But the Bills game means less to me than this game today does. Like, if you win today, Purdy shouldn't play next week at all. I think it's give him 2 weeks off, 3 weeks off. Let's let him rest. If you win today, Purdy shouldn't play against the Bills at all. Let's see here. Lori Matthews says, how did we go talking about Super Bowl revenge to Daniel Jones saving our season? That's how crazy 2024 has been, Lori. It was, we're going to be back, and CMC and Debo, and now Ayuk is in the fray, and Trent's healthy, he's back, and we're more durable, we're improved, to it's like, can we please get Daniel Jones as quarterback? It's been a really, really, really bad season for the San Francisco 49ers. Man, oh man, oh man. Let's see what we got here in the YouTube chat still. Frank asks here, I know nothing about Brandon Allen. Is he a statue? He's more of a statue than Brock Purdy, but if you're comparing him to Daniel Jones or Joshua Dobbs, I can argue he's a more precision pocket passer than those two quarterbacks. He also has had, Daniel Jones has had better games than both the quarterbacks. And Joshua Dobbs' season last year, albeit had a lot of cavernous lows, there was more to like than Brandon Allen in his entire career. But Allen has had a few games here or there where you're like, okay, that's not that bad. Not that bad. So I really think this is more of a Brock's not playing, Shanahan saying, you know what, I trust my guys and I trust my system to beat Green Bay. I mean, there's a reason why San Francisco owns Green Bay. Yes, there's quarterbacking play involved and a great defense involved, but ultimately, Shanahan's system has owned Green Bay's defense. Now, I think that'll change today. Obviously, quarterback plays a massive part of that, but I do think Shanahan trusts his system to a fault to be the key factor in beating Green Bay. Thus, that's why Allen's starting And I think you'll see a few plays, you're like, oh, okay, it actually isn't that bad, but it's about, can you string a drive together? That's where things get more concerning in regards to Brandon Allen's game today. Bobo says here, Lori, yes, this is the revenge tour year 32. Yeah. But also that goes into why they shouldn't fire Kyle Shanahan because, well, it's the most success they've had since 1995. But there is, going back to Brock Purdy and Daniel Jones, if Brock is back in 2 weeks against the Bills or against the Bears, then there really doesn't seem to be a reasonable thought into signing Daniel Jones unless you want to have a 2-year contract or Jones is open to backing up Brock Purdy for the next 5 to 6 weeks and being released or let go in the offseason, not brought back so San Francisco can get a compensatory pick in return. That's kind of the incentive to get a deal done for both these guys. And if Brock goes down again or misses more time, Jones would obviously be the quarterback too. I'd rather have Joshua Dobbs simply because, well, you're already paying him money, and somehow he's not the quarterback 2, he's quarterback 3, and in some weeks is inactive. Doesn't make sense to me, but I don't make decisions in San Francisco. Although sometimes I feel like I should, but I'm sure we all do at certain points in our times of life. But what do you think? Do you think Brock Purdy is going to be out longer than they're saying? Do you think it's more serious than San Francisco is leading on to be? Or do you think he'll be back in 2 weeks' time against the Bills or against the Bears? And should the San Francisco 49ers try to sign Daniel Jones this season? If he clears waivers, he's a free agent. Do you think signing Danny Dimes is worth the risk? What do you think? Sound off below in the comments. You can follow us on social media at 49ers_access is the X or Twitter. 49ers.access is the Instagram. If you want to watch your favorite team play this year, whether it's the NFL, the NBA, or a concert or festival, go to SeatGeek.com and use that promo code 49ersaccess, 49ERSACCESS at SeatGeek.com to save yourself $20 off your first purchase. And if you're waiting on the latest news of your favorite team, again, NFL, MLB, NBA, does not matter. Go to SportsSpider.com or click that link down below in the description. Latest podcast, news, articles, tweets of your favorite team in one spot just for you. But again, what do you think San Francisco should do? George says here, call Tom Brady. Well, Tom Brady would have to sell a stake in the Raiders to make that happen, but you never know. You never, ever know. Like, share, subscribe, leave that review. Thank you to Dre Area Sports, Bobo, George, Frank, Fish and Chips, Lori Matthews, Joseph Ernberg, and many, many others like Santa Clara Fella, also in the YouTube chat. Thank you all so much for commenting. If you can, leave a comment down below. And to like, share, subscribe, leave that review. And as always, my name is Sterling Bennett, and stay faithful.